So good day everyone. So welcome to our new and second topic for Introduction to World Religion and Belief System. So now we are going to analyze and observe this very interesting topic. So what is the origin of religion in the world? So naisip niyo na ba kung saan nagmula o nagsimula ang iba't ibang relihiyon at paano sila nagsimula? Yan mismo ang ating tatalakayin ngayon. So makakatulong ang aralin ito upang maunawaan natin ang pinagmulan ng iba't ibang pananampalataya sa buong mundo. Next slide. But before that, so we have here different learning competency. So number one, so we need to cite regions or places where specific religions evolved. Number two, so we need to analyze the culture of region that gave rise to specific religion. And we need to explain how geography influence religions and religions affects cultures. And last, so we need to conduct a group activity that demonstrate the influence of this specific religion in a certain culture. Let's go back in time, way back to the historical background of religions. So alam nyo ba na may kahit ang mga sinaunang tao katulad ng Neanderthals o Cro-Magnons ay may kanya-kanya na silang paniniwala o sinaunang paniniwala. At alam din natin to dahil sa kanilang mga gawi katulad ng practicing of burying the dead o paniniwala sa paglilibing na kung saan sinasamahan nila ito ng mga agamitan katulad ng tools and flowers. Okay? This suggesting a belief in afterlife o ang paniniwala nila sa kabilang buhay. They also painted walls or cave walls and carved images from stones, which could be parts of rituals or ways to connect with the spirit forces. Ipinapakita lang nito sa atin ang mga tao ay laging may pangailangan na unawain ang mundo sa kanilang paligid upang makahanap ng kahulugan at upang kumekta sa isang bagay na higit pa sa kanilang sarili. Sa loob ng napakahabang panahon, ang mga naunang paniniwalang ito ay nag-evolve sa komplikadong reliyon na alam natin ngayon. Over a very long time, these early beliefs evolved into complex religions we know today. Some religions like Zoroastrianism were once widespread but are now practiced by fewer people, showing how beliefs can change and adapt or sometimes fade over time. Now let's look some important dates to give us timeline of when some major religions started to take shape. Like for example, around 2000 BCE or before Common Era, so we have Abraham, this really important figure, especially for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He's considered the father of patriarch of the Israelite people. Then around 1200 BCE, so we have Moses. He known for leading the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, an event called Exodus, and receiving the Ten Commandments. While between 1100 and 500 BCE, the Hindus were compiling their sacred texts or banal na kasulatan that called Vedas. These are ancient scriptures that form the foundation of Hinduism, wherein this period is called the Vedic period, a very significant time for the development of Hindu beliefs. Next slide. While around 563 and 83 BCE or before Common Era, we have the time of Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who founded Buddhism. He wasn't a god, actually. So, tandaan natin, Buddha itself is not a god, okay? But a human who sought enlightenment. Close to that time, from 551 to 479 BCE or before Common Era, so we lead to Confucius, the great Chinese philosopher who founded Confucianism. His teaching focused on morality, ethics, and good governance. While around 200 BCE or before Common Era, another important Hindu text like the Bhagavad Gita was written. This is very popular in influential scripture within Hinduism. often read it for philosophical insight. Around 2 to 4 BCE to 32 CE or Common Era, so we have the life of Jesus Christ, who is considered the Messiah by Christians and the founder of Christianity. His crucifixion, with his crucifixions and resurrections around 32 CE are central events in Christian beliefs, marking the foundation of the Christian faith. Then, from 40 to 90 CE, the New Testament was written by Jesus' followers. These collections of books tells the story of Jesus' life, his teaching, and early Christian church. And finally, to complete our timeline, around 100 CE or Common Era, we see the beginnings of Shintoism in Japan. Interestingly, Shintoism has no single known founder, as it evolved from Asian Japanese animistic beliefs and practices. From 500 to 580 CE or Common Era, lived to Lao Tzu, the philosopher credited from founding Taoism in China. His teaching emphasized living in harmony with Tao or the Way. Lastly, from 570 to 632 CE was the time of Muhammad, who Muslims believe receives revelation from God, which were then recorded in the Quran or the Holy Book of Islam. He is considered the final prophet in Islam. Now, let's focus on very significant figure mentioned earlier like Abraham. He is called the patriarch because he is considered a foundational father figure for a large portion of world's population. Abraham played a major role in the establishment of the three world's biggest religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These three religions are monotheistic. Again, when we say monotheistic, we are believing or they are believing in one God. Together, they account for more than half of the world's population. Because of Abraham's central role, these religions are often collectively called Abrahamic religion. Again, so since they are connected with each other and have the same uh, characteristic of kind of religion, they are called Abrahamic religion. So if you hear Abrahamic religion, it refers to these three. Next, why is Abraham so important? His significance comes from two main reasons. He is seen as primary figure for the idea of believing in one God or monotheism. His story is often where the concept of a single, all-powerful God truly begins to take shape in this tradition. Second, we also consider a paragon or an exemplar or extreme devotion to God, or his willingness to follow God's commands, even when difficult serve as model for believers in all three faiths. He shows immense faith and obedience. So these slides probably shows a family tree or genealogy of Abraham. So ito ang genealogy o talangkanan ni Abraham. So ito isang halagang bahagi ng kasaysayan ng mga relihiyong Abrahamiko o yung Abrahamic religion na katulad ng Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So ang kasaysayang ito ay umiikot sa tatlong mahalagang babae. So, dito. Una dyan, si Hagar, okay? Si Hagar, Sarah, at si Ketura, okay? Sarah, Hagar, at Ketura. At kung paano naging daan ang kanilang mga anak sa pag-usbong ng mga dakilang pinuno o relihiyosong tradisyon. Okay, simulan natin kay Abraham. Si Abraham noon ay kinikilalang ama ng maraming bansa o father of many nations. Siya ang pangunahing patriarka ng Judaism, Christianity at Islam. So meron siyang tatlong pangunahing asawa o kinakasama. Una, si Sarah sa gitna, ang asawang legal ni Abraham. Nagkaanak sila na si Isaac. Sa pamamagitan naman ni Isaac, ipinanganak si Jacob na naging Israel. Si Jacob ay may 12 anak. Ang 12 na kumakatawan naman sa 12 tribo ng Israel. Mula sa linyang ito ay kalaunay ipinanganak si Jesus sa Kristyanismo na mula sa angkan ni David na galing kay Jacob at Judah. So ngayon, ito ay naging daan upang umusbong ang reliyong Kristyanismo at Judaismo na may kanalaman dito. Samantalang kay Hagar ay katulong ni Sarah at naging asawang alipin ni Abraham. Nagkaroon sila ng anak na si Ishmael. Sa pamamagitan ni Ishmael, ituturing na ninuno ng mga Arabo. Mula sa lahi ni Ishmael ay pinanganak si Propeta Muhammad. Nakalaunay, nagbigay daan upang may tatag ang reliyong Islam. Samantalang si Keturah, sa naging ikalawang asawa ni Abraham, matapos mamatay si Sarah, ay nagkaroon ng anak na si Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Bagamat kakaunti lang ang tala mula sa kanilang mga anak, sila ay naniniwalang ang ilang sa mga historiador o historian na siya ang mga anak nila ang siya naging ninuno ng ilang pangkat o tribo sa silangang bahagi ng Arabia o Africa. Alamin naman natin ang pagkakapare-pareho ng mga reliyon under Abrahamic religion. So despite their differences, the Abrahamic religion shares some fundamental commonalities. Like the most important one is that they all worship in one supreme being, or if they are believing in one God. For the ancient Hebrew, who are the ancestor of modern Jews, they refer to God as Elohim, Adonai, or mas kilala natin sa tawag na Yahweh. Today, in Judaism, they often use the word Lord or God, or the name of the Lord or God to refer to the divine. While for Muslims, they call God Allah, or they call God as Allah. It's important to remember that Allah is simply the Arabic word for God, and it's the same God worshipped by Christians and Jews, just referred to by differently, as same called with Yahweh. Next, another commonality is the significant role of prophets and apostles. These are individuals chosen by God to deliver message or guide people. In Judaism, there's a long line of prophets and even prophetesses with figures like Abraham, Moses, and Joshua being very clearly and crucial. Christianity recognized 12 apostles who were just closest disciples and play a great key role in spreading his teaching and writing parts of New Testament. And in Islam, Muhammad is considered the final prophet or the seal of the prophets, meaning he is the chosen prophet in Islam. Next, before these religions became fully organized, their origins are deeply connected to divine revelations or interventions, meaning God directly communicated or acted in the lives of their ancestors. For Judaism, we have the story of God instructing Abraham to sacrifice Isaac on the Mount of Moriah, wherein this will serve as a test of faith. For Judaism and Christianity, God gave the 10 Commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai, which are fundamental moral laws. For Christianity, the central belief is that God sacrificed his son, Jesus Christ, through crucifixions as part of plan for humanity's salvation. And for Islam, God commanded Muhammad to establish a new religion through revelations he received in a cave on Mount Hira. These divine encounters are fundamental to each faith. Finally, a universal theme across all three Abrahamic religions is constant presence of a choice between good and evil. From their earliest days until now, believers are faced with moral decisions, and their faith provides guidance on how to live righteously with and choose the path of good over evil. This concept of moral responsibility is central to their teachings. Now, let's shift our let's shift our focus to another way rich region for religious origins like India. We'll call this section the Indian mosaic because Indian is vibrant blends of cultures, tradition, and of course, religion. In India is truly an ancient with a history going back to at least 6,500 BCE. That's over 8,500 years of civilization. What's fascinating about India is how it's handled many conquerors throughout history. Instead of being completely overtaken, the native Indian religions and culture had a way of absorbing these foreign influences. Think of an Indian culture as beautiful mosaic made up of many different pieces. Key, these key pieces include the ancient Harappan civilization, also known as Indus Valley civilization, one of the world's first great urban cultures, while the Aryan influence, which brought new languages and religious ideas that blended with existing ones, various local dynasties that rose and fell, and later the Muslim conquest, which introduced Islam to the region. All these elements contributed to the incredible variety and complexity that defines Indian cultures and its religious tradition. It's not just one thing, it's a rich tapestry. From this rich mosaic of culture, four great religions originated in India, like Hinduism, where is the oldest one, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. Aside from these major ones, there are also countless smaller cults and local sects, making India a true birthplace of diverse spiritual paths, like spiritual melting pot, as I say. Let's start with Hinduism. It's perhaps the most defining religion of India. It truly reflects the heterogeneity or diversity of India. For outsider, it can seem a bit confusing because it's so eclectic. It has no specific founder, unlike Buddhism with Buddha or Gautama Buddha. For Christianity with Jesus, it has no single sacred book. It has many important scriptures like Vedas, Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, but no single Bible. It has no innumerable gods and goddesses. It has innumerable gods and goddesses. Hindus can choose which deities to venerate. Because of this vastness and variety, Hinduism is often called Museum of Religion. Again, because of vastness and variety in Hinduism, they are often called as Museum of Religion. It contains so many different paths and expressions of faith within itself. Hinduism is also known as Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal law or eternal way, really became systematized during Vedic period. This was when its core ideas about order and purpose in the universe and in human life were developed. During this time, the idea of universal order was linked to having a stable society. This is seen in how centralized government was formed and how many traditions became integrated into daily Indian life, creating a structured way of living and believing. Next is Buddhism. Unlike Hinduism, Buddhism centers on a specific figure, the Buddha. It's crucial to understand that Buddha was not a god. He was a human being. Siddhartha Gautama, who through the through the meditation or deep meditation and insight discovered a path to end of suffering and escape the cycle of birth, wherein they call it samsara. While Buddha is not a god, his followers revere him deeply. They show respect and devotion to him, much like how followers of other religions worship their God. But it's more about honoring his teaching and his example as guide to enlightenment. Buddhism has different schools or sects. Two major ones are Theravada and Mahayana. So these slides highlight a key differences. First is Mahayana sect is known for its rich array of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. What are Bodhisattvas? They are enlightened beings who are already eligible to enter nirvana, or they call it the ultimate state of peace and freedom from suffering. But they choose to delay their own nirvana out of compassion. Why? To stay and guide others to path the salvation. This concept of compassionate delay is central to Mahayana Buddhism, making it more accessible to wider range of people. Siddhartha Gautama, or the Buddha, was born around 6th century BCE, or before Common Era. His life story is the very foundation of Buddhism. Buddhism gained many new followers because it had a mass appeal, unlike some Hindu beliefs that were tied to a strict caste system. Buddhism offers a path to enlightenment for everyone, regardless of their social standing. This inclusivity helped Buddhism spread far and wide from its origin in India, first to Sri Lanka, and then throughout Southeast Asia, including the countries like Thailand, Cambodia, and Myanmar. From Southeast Asia, Buddhism continued its journey and it was transported to China, Korea, and Japan, and Vietnam also, adapting to each culture it encountered, and even crossed the mighty Himalayas to reach the Tibetan land, where it developed a unique form known as Tibetan Buddhism. It's interesting to note that today, Buddhism is often more popular outside its place of origin, which is India, while Hinduism has remained deeply rooted or entrenched in India for centuries. This shows how regions can have a different trajectories of growth and geographical spread. Now let's move to East Asia, specifically China, and explore philosophies and religions that revolve around the concept of the way or Tao. Let's talk about Confucianism. The Chinese people, even in ancient times, were very focused on good governance and creating stable society. They found a guiding philosophy in Confucius' ideals and ethics. His teachings were so influential that China adopted them as basis for its government, leading to the development of meritocracy. Meritocracy, this means that the power and position in government were given to those with superior intellect and abilities, rather than just rather than those just noble birth, where it was about choosing the most capable people to lead. Confucius is considered China's greatest philosopher and teacher. He lived around the same time as Buddha in India, which was period of great intellectual and spiritual awakening across Asia. Confucian ideals primarily aim to harmonize rather human relations, meaning how people interact with each other in a peaceful and respectful way. So his teaching provides a guide for social behavior, emphasizing virtues like respect, loyalty, and filial piety. For Confucian followers, the ultimate goal is to establish an ideal human society where everyone lives in harmony. Confucius also talks about the concept of Tao. We can pronounce it as Tao, D-O-W. For him, the Tao was about the truth or the right way things ought to be done. It's about living in accordance with a specific view of life, politics, and custom. Importantly, the Confucian Tao primarily concerns about human affairs, how humans should behave, govern, and interact to create a moral and orderly society. It's more about practical ethics for human living. Now, let's look at Taoism, another Chinese philosophy. Its origins are a bit more mysterious, especially concerning its founder, Lao Tzu or Lao Tzu. He is traditionally credited with writing the Tao Te Ching or Tao Te Ching, a fundamental text of Taoism. Lao Tzu is believed to have been a modern version of Confucius, meaning they live around the same time. The story goes that he worked as a record keeper during the Zhou dynasty, but became frustrated with the corruption he saw in society. Because this, he decided to live and seeking a more natural and simple way of life. While Laozi teachings are philosophical, Taoism began to be organized as religion around 142 CE, with establishment of the way of celestial master text during the Han Dynasty. Like Confucianism, Taoism also enters the concept of Tao, but here the Tao is understood as a way of path that signifies the appropriateness of one's behavior, not just for personal conduct, but also for how one should lead or influence others. It's about living in harmony with the natural flow of the universe. To clarify the concept of Tao in Taoism, literally, Tao can mean road, path, or way, the manner in which something is done. But in a deeper sense, or let's say philosophical sense, the Taoist or Tao refers to the way of the universe or the way the universe works. Its underlying natural order, the cosmic principles that governs everything. Taoists believe that understanding and aligning oneself with this cosmic Tao, one can achieve peace, balance, and harmony. Moving to Japan, we have Shintoism. This is loosely organized local belief system that is deeply intertwined with Japanese culture and identity. It's often seen as dedicated form of Japanese patriotism. A key aspect of Shinto mythology is the belief that Japan is superior to other lands and that their emperors are direct descendants of the sun goddesses called Amaterasu. This belief gave the emperor a divine status and reinforced a strong sense of national identity and pride among Japanese people. In Shintoism, There is a strong emphasis on revering the beauty of Japan's natural landscape, especially its mountains, like the sacred Mount Fuji. Nature is seen as divine, wherein the term Shinto itself was coined around 16th century CE. Why? Because by then, many religions from China and Korea, like Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, had arrived in Japan. The term Shinto was used to distinguish the native Japanese belief system from this imported faith, giving it a unique identity. Where did word Shinto come from? It's derived from Chinese word, Shen and Tao, which roughly translates the way of God. Central to Shintoism are the kami. These are often translated as God, but they're much more than that. Kami can be deity of heaven and earth, spirit found in human beings and animals, trees, seas, and mountains, and even abstract forces of nature or important ancestors. So kami are divine essence that inhabit the natural world and significant people or objects. And they are and they are primal importance in Shinto worship. Now, we're going to explore geography of faith. This section will focus on how physical environment and location influence the development and spread of religions. So we'll divide it into three main areas. One is the western frontier, or mainly west, home to Abrahamic religion. Number two is the Indian continent or Indian subcontinent, where Hinduism and Buddhism originated. Number three, the eastern end, or the China and Japan, where Confucianism, Taoism, and Shintoism flourished. Let's start with the western frontier, which is primarily West Asia. This region is the birthplace of the three Abrahamic religions, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Unfortunately, the history of West Asia has often seen these three religions these religions become deeply involved in domestic politics, leading to prolonged conflicts and immense loss of life. This shows how powerful religion can be, sometimes for good and sometimes leading to conflict when intertwined with political power. The Levant is a historical and geographical term referring to a large area in eastern Mediterranean, including modern-day Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Syria, and Palestine, which are central to this faith. Geographically, Israel is unique as the only country with Jewish majority population, making up about 75% of its citizens. This highlight is significant for Judaism. The Arabian Peninsula, or the world's largest peninsula, is dominated by Islamic countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE. Within Islam, there are two major denominations, which is Shia and Sunni. Iran and Iraq are predominantly Shia, while most Muslim in Saudi Arabia belongs to Sunni branch. This division through within the same religions have sometimes led to political and social complexity in the religions. The topography or physical features of West Asia heavily influence its religious beliefs. It has a vast of mountains terrain, which think about it as mountains often feel grand, mysterious, and closer to the heaven. Because of this, these landforms became ideal setting for religious narrative. Many stories tells of gods living on mountains, or prophets receiving revelation there, like Moses on Mount Sinai. Mountains became sacred spaces where divine and human worlds could meet. So this imagery usually represents the deep connection between the land and the sacred story of Abrahamic faith. It helps us visualize the places where these profound events are believed to have happened. Let's talk about one of the most contested and sacred sites globally, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It is revered by the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. For Jews, it is their holiest shrine, believed to be the site of their ancient temples. It's also believed to be Mount Moriah, where Abraham almost sacrificed Isaac. On the same site, you'll find three prominent Islamic structures like the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, and the Dome of the Chain. This shared sacred space highlights the intertwined history of these faiths, but also the source of much conflict. Beyond mountains, the vast deserts and bodies of water in West Asia also played crucial role in biblical story and religious narratives. Think of the Israelites wandering in the deserts for 40 years or parting the Red Sea. So these geographical features were not just backdrop. They were active elements in the story of divine intervention and human struggles, shaping the spiritual understanding of people. Today, the city of Jerusalem in Israel remains incredibly important for followers of all Abrahamic religions. It's considered a holy city by all three because it contains numerous sites central to their belief. Just imagine, in one city, you can find more than 1,000 synag- synag- synagogues, synagogues, Jewish place for worship, more than 100 churches, Christian place for worship, and more than 7 mosques, Islamic places of worship. This density and sacred sites makes Jerusalem a unique and deeply significant spiritual hub. Within Jerusalem, the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall or Kotel, is incredibly sacred. It's one of the four remaining walls that surrounded the ancient Temple Mount. For Jews, it's their second shrine, holiest shrine, a place where they come to pray and connect with their heritage and a memory of their destroyed temple. Where actually uh, mostly visitors write in a small paper and then like, they going to insert those paper on some holes on that wall. For Christians, Jerusalem has been sacred for nearly 2,000 years. Key sites include Mount Zion, often associated with biblical events, and most importantly, the Church of Holy Sepulchre. This church is believed to encompass the most crucial sites in Christianity: Golgotha, the place where Jesus was crucified, and the empty tomb of Jesus, where he is believed to have been resurrected. These sites are central to Christian pilgrimage. Finally, for Muslims, Jerusalem has been sacred for almost 1,400 years. For Sunni Muslim, it's considered the third holiest city after Mecca and Medina. The iconic Dome of the Rock, located in the Temple Mount, is the most recognizable Islamic structure in Jerusalem. It's believed to be the spot from which Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the night or during his night journey. It's also important to note that this same site is believed to be where Jewish first and the second temple where once stood, highlighting the deep historical and religious layer of this single location. Still, on the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is another significant Islamic structure, also associated with Prophet Muhammad's night journey. Now let's transition to Indian subcontinent. This vast area covers over a half million square miles geographically. It defines by the Hindu Kush and Baluchi Hills to the west. The majestic Himalayan mountain range to the north is the highest mountain in the world. The Burmese mountain to east and the Indian Ocean to the south. This diverse geography played a huge role in the development and its unique culture and religion. Over 4,000 years ago, a remarkable civilization emerged along Indus River in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. This was the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as Harappan Civilization. They developed a highly advanced and unique culture long before Christian era, with well-planned cities, sophisticated drainage system, and their own writing system. This ancient foundation laid the groundwork for later Indian civilization and religious thought that sweltering heat is major characteristic of Indian climate. It's incredibly hot, so it's not surprising that Hinduism there's deep reverence for natural elements that bring light and warmth, but also power. Hindus revere the sun or Surya, which is essential for life, and fire Agni, which is seen as purifier and linked to the divine. This shows how geography directly influenced their religious practices and deities. Just as it is important, water also play a major role in India religion, especially Hinduism. Hindus venerate Varuna, a god associated with water and celestial ocean. The major rivers of South Asia, the Indus, Ganga Yamuna, and Brahmaputra, are the lifeblood of countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Among these, the Ganga or Ganges River is considered the holiest river for Hindus. It's not just a river, it's a sacred mother, believed to have a purifying power. Many Hindus perform rituals and pilgrimage to its bank. The Ganga River is dotted with numerous Asian pilgrimage sites and the holy cities along entire length from its source in Himalayas to where it meets the oceans. Cities like Rishikesh, Haridwar, Prayag, and Varanasi are incredibly sacred to Hindus. Millions of pilgrims visit these places annually to bathe in holy waters, perform rituals, and seek spiritual merit. This highlights the deep connection between the sacred geography and religious practices. Interestingly, Varanasi, a city deeply sacred to Hindus, is also important religion site for Buddhists. It is marked by Dhamek Stupa shrine, which commemorates a significant event. It was the deep, it was in the Deer Park near Varanasi or Sarnath that the Buddha delivered his first sermon and gathered his first disciple. So this event is now commemorated by Chak Chakhandi Stupa monument. So this shows how sacred sites can sometimes hold significance for multiple religions. Now, let's journey to the eastern end of Asia, dominated by Asian civilization of China. China geographical location, specifically in the valley of the Huanghe or Yellow River, the Yangtze River, was the incredibly favorable. These two great rivers provided fertile land and agriculture and easy transportation, allowing Chinese civilization to flourish. This made historic China in a center of culture where philosophy like Confucianism and Taoism could develop and spread. While Confucius lived in the 6th and 5th century BCE or before Common Era, his teaching didn't immediately became widespread. It took until the second millennium after his death for his uh, philosophy to truly spread across China. By, by the powerful Han Dynasty, Confucian's teaching had become more influential that they were essentially adopted as a state religion, guiding governance and social norms. Confucianism also spread beyond China. In Korea, it became widespread around the 15th century, and in Japan, it was largely accepted during 18th and 19th century. This shows how philosophy can take time to gain tractions and how they can transcend borders to influence other cultures. Unlike Confucianism, which aimed to fix society through order, Taoism emerged as a response to the widespread warfare and social turmoil during the later part of the Zhou dynasty. People were tired of constant struggle for power, wealth, and prestige. Taoism offered a different path. It served as guiding principle to abandon and withdraw from this disorder. It encouraged people to seek harmony with nature and cosmic Tao, rather than getting caught up in worldly conflict. It's a philosophy of finding peace by letting go and aligning with the natural flow of life. This slide reinforces the strong cultural exchange between China and Korea. Korea had a great deal of exposure to Chinese culture, particularly during the powerful Han Dynasty or powerful Han and Tang Dynasty. This dynasty maintained close ties with the Koreans, leading to the transition of ideas, technologies, and, of course, religion and philosophical tradition. This cultural diffusion is a key part of East Asian history. Let's look at Korea's connection to China during the period of three kingdoms like Goguryeo, Silla, and Baekje. Korea was heavily influenced by its powerful neighbor, China. As a result, Korea adopted both Buddhism and Confucianism for the Chinese mainland, from the Chinese mainland. These philosophies and religions become deeply integrated into Korean society, shaping its culture, governance, and spiritual life. Japan, too, was significantly influenced by China. The Japanese feudal system, with its emphasis on hierarchy and loyalty, found resonance with the ideals of Confucianism. The Confucian concept of filial piety, deep respect for parents and elders, perfectly comprehend the existing Japanese practice of ancestorship or ancestor worship. Elements of Confucianism and even Taoism became deeply entrenched in Japanese culture, influencing their social structure, ethics, and even their arts and culture. This shows how different cultures' elements can blend and reinforce each other. The Eastern End. The arrival of Buddhism in Japan between the 4th and 8th century had profound the impact of its religious traditions. As mentioned earlier, the term Shinto was introduced to differentiate the native Japanese belief from this new foreign religion. However, instead of outright conflict, there was often fusion between Shintoism and Buddhism. Shinto followers began to acknowledge that the many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of Buddhism were actually revelation of the Kami, or their own native deities. This led to syncretic blood of two faiths. Japan also developed its own, unique from Buddhism, with Zen Buddhism becoming particularly prominent, known for its emphasis on meditation and enlightenment. Now, let's discuss cultural milieu, or the cultural environment in which religions exist. We can categorize world religion based on their exclusivity and non-exclusivity. Exclusive religions typically believe their path is the only one true path to salvation or truth. They're often monotheistic like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, where belief in one God is central and often there are emphasis on conversion or adherence to specific doctrines. Non-exclusive religions, on the other hand, tend to be more open to multiple paths to truth or salvation. They often don't emphasize conversation in the same way. Example include Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, and Shintoism. These faiths often coexist, and sometimes even blend with each other, as we saw with Shintoism and Buddhism in Japan. Let's delve deeper into monotheism and universality. Judaism and Islam both affirm the presence of God in a Unitarian creed, meaning God is one, undivided being rather. Christianity, while also monotheistic, has a Trinitarian creed, acknowledging one God existing in three persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So the Father and the Son Jesus Christ represent the Son, the Holy Spirit. This is a key theological differences among Abrahamic faiths. For Islam, the basic principles of faith and practice are summarized in the five pillars of Islam, which includes faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage. So these slides explain the concept of universalizing versus ethnic religion. Christianity and Islam are considered universalizing religions. This means they actively seek to spread their message globally and welcome converts from all backgrounds. They aim to operate on uh, they aim to operate on a worldwide scale. Judaism, on the other hand, is considered an ethnic religion, while anyone can convert to Judaism. It primarily draws its members from a specific group of people, or the Jewish people, who have shared ancestry and cultural heritage, often tied to definite locality like Israel. Its practice and rituals have been passed down continuously through generations within this group. It's more about identity and heritage. The concept of dharma is integral in religion that emerged in India, including Hinduism. Now, let's explore the concept of dharma, which is central to many Indians' religion. In Hinduism, dharma is very broad concept. It can mean duty, righteousness, and ethics. It refers to the moral and ethical principles that guides human conduct. These are universal virtues like peacefulness, empathy, and kindness, things that are good for all humanity. For Buddhism, Dharma has slightly different influence. It refers to the cosmic law and order that governs the universe, but more commonly, it refers to the teaching of Buddha himself, which revealed the truth of how things are really are. So, following the Dharma is Buddhism means following the Buddha's path to enlightenment. In Theravada sect of Buddhism, Dharma can also refer to all factors of Buddhism. The basic elements can make up reality. An important characteristic of Dharmic religion, like Hinduism and Buddhism, is that they are not compelled their adherents to publicly profess their devotions or declare themselves a believer in a formal way. It's it's often more about practice and inner transformations. Instead, practice like meditations and yogas rituals are seen as way to cultivate right culture and ultimately lead to a deeper understanding of universe and of oneself. It's a path of personal discovery and experiences. While Hinduism and Buddhism share some common goals, like achieving enlightenment and liberation from suffering, they have key differences. Hindu believes in Trimurti, which are the three main gods, the three main forms of God, like Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. They also have vast pantheons of gods and goddesses. Buddhists, however, do not believe in the existence of gods and goddesses in the traditional sense. Therefore, they don't see the needs of intermediaries like priests between humans and gods, nor do they perform many rituals associated with venerating deities. The focus in Buddhism is on individual effort and understanding the teaching to achieve enlightenment, not a worshipping a divine being. On nature and ancestor, we'll explore the concept of nature and ancestor, particularly on the context of Chinese and Japanese belief. In ancient Chinese culture, the cult of Heaven, venerating a supreme celestial power, and ancestor worship were very important. This practice became deeply integrated into Confucian philosophy and belief. Confucian itself had a strong belief in a natural order, that he saw a moral order. He believed that if humans live in harmony with this natural moral order, society would be just a peaceful, so respecting, uh, just society will just be a peaceful. So respecting ancestor and heavens was part of the moral framework. For Confucian followers, building an ideal human society is paramount, along with maintaining harmonious relationship between humans and heaven. To achieve this ideal society, Confucius emphasized five basic social relationships. One, ruler and subject. The ruler should be benevolent and the subject should be loyal. Father and son. The father should be loving and the son should be filial or respectful and obedient. Third is husband and wife. They should be distinct in their role, but respectful to each other. Number four, older and younger brother. The older should be kind and the younger should be respectful, while friends or members of the community, number five, should be trustworthy and loyal. This relationship forms the bedrock of harmonious and ethical society in Confucian thought. In Shintoism, the connection between divinities or kami and nature is incredibly strong. Kami are believed to reside in or be manifestation of natural forces and objects. A prime example is a sacred mount of Fuji. It considers an abode of Japanese gods and surrounded by numerous temples and shrines. It's not just a mountain, it's sacred entity. Mount Fuji is one of the Japan's three holy mountains, along with Mount Cape and Mount Haku. These highlight how deeply nature is revered into Shinto beliefs. In Shintoism, shrines are built for various purposes to venerate or remember ancestors, to or commemorate significant occurrences or events, and last, and very importantly, to honor natural phenomena like mountains, river, rocks, and trees, which are believed to house kami. Shinto followers perform ritualistic practices diligently to connect with their present society and their nation's past. Reinforcing their cultural identity is also common for majority of Shinto followers to also practice Buddhism, showing the syncretic nature of religion in Japan, where different faiths can coexist and even blend.